very pleased to be here. My name is Martin Wolf. I write for the Financial Times, and for some slightly unaccountable reason, I have been given responsibility for a number of sessions on climate change, of which I think this is the most exciting and most important. And the question is, after all the talk, is there actually going to be any action to make a difference to the trends? We have had, for a number of reasons which purely accidental, had some changes in the panel, but it remains an immensely distinguished group of people. Just to introduce the subject, I think this is where we are, and there are just 4 points I think you need to bear in mind, or at least as the way I see it as somebody who's come to look at this very recently. First, we have been talking as a world community in some sense about this problem for about 20 years, and not merely has the stock of greenhouse gases continued to rise rapidly, but so has the annual flow. So, judged by the task of reducing not only the stock but the flow, we have failed completely. There has been, to use a time-worn pun on this, an enormous amount of hot air and no action whatsoever that has made a difference to anything important.
Just briefly, I wanted to mention something about the climate change. In the last 5 years, the news has gone from bad to worse. There are predictions, for example, to be provincial, California. The snowpack in the Sierras varies from a decrease of 30% to a decrease of 90%. So there is uncertainty there. But even the least alarmist climate models are now saying 30 to 50% decrease in snowpack. Snowpack is our water storage. And even a 20 or 30% decrease in snowpack leads to severe water problems in California. 50% our agriculture will be gone. And beyond that, we run out of drinking water. So there are many things like that. The sea level is rising much faster than anticipated. It is at the upper range of what was predicted 5 or 10 years ago. And the list goes down, and the list continues. So we have to do something about this. It has to be both on energy efficiency and conservation. This remains the lowest hanging fruit. The United States, for example, uses typically twice as much as developed countries in terms of energy per person. The other developed countries, Europe, Japan, want to go down by a factor of 2. And I think for the United States, a factor of 2 to 4 is eminently possible without really fundamentally disrupting a lifestyle change, just becoming smarter. The other thing is that science has to come to the fore here. There is a possibility that biofuels can replace a significant fraction of gasoline. In the United States, the estimate is between 1/3 and all of gasoline imports. If not through corn, but through cellulose and modern methods to make the conversion of cellulose into biofuels more economical. Carbon sequestration of coal-burning plants is a must. That will not start unless we have some sort of carbon cap and trade. It can start now and slowly ramp up over a 10 or 15-year period, and that alone will tell industry, be prepared.
China has made great efforts and will continue with further improvement. First, to build a resource-conserving and environment-friendly society, increasing energy efficiency, promote the development of clean and renewable energy, and strengthen the protection of ecology and the environment. From 1990 to 2005, China's per-unit GDP energy consumption reduced 46%, which was equivalent to the reduction of 1.8 billion tons of CO2 emission. China has carried out a forestation campaign of the largest scale in the world, and is observed a net total of over 2 billion tons of CO2. In the energy consumption mix of 2005, renewable energy accounted for 7.5%, which was equivalent to the reduction of 380 million tons of CO2 emission.
Since 1992, you've had the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, followed by the Kyoto Protocol, and developing countries have been working within a policy framework laid down by that. Now, as far as India is concerned, as you know, that framework laid down mandatory restrictions for industrialized countries, but recognizing that the developing countries were contributing very little to the problem and also historically had contributed virtually nothing, no imposition of limits was considered for the developing countries in the Kyoto Protocol. But within that, the developing countries were expected to do a number of things. And we have certainly been doing that. That includes efforts to improve energy efficiency, maximize the use of renewable energy to the extent to which one can, shift from coal to some experimenting with clean coal technologies. In our case, we are keen to switch as much as possible to nuclear energy and work within an incentive framework, which is not the same thing as mandatory restrictions, but, you know, the clean development mechanism and so on, that would essentially help to contribute to reducing carbon emissions. Now, India has been doing all these things.
We have Mr. Nunes here, who represents, or who is part of the politics, a leading figure in the politics of California, which is a leader. So what are you doing, and what does this mean for the possible future of American climate change policy?
Well, I'm glad you made the distinction between California and the Bush administration, although I must say that many of us were hopeful that President Bush would dig a little deeper beyond a noticing of the fact that climate change is a reality. An acknowledgement of that, I think, is a good thing. We hope that we can push further. But we decided in California to take a major step to reduce our carbon footprint this past year with landmark legislation, which we called the Global Warming Reduction Act of 2006, which in essence says that by the year 2020, we're going to reduce our carbon emissions in California to the 1990 levels, which it translates directly into 174 million metric tons of carbon reductions for our state. And our attitude is, if our national government isn't doing something about it, we in California, being the nation state that California is in many ways, need to take the leadership to pressure our federal government from the bottom up.
Technology is our friend in most instances. It provides solutions which have actually proven that you can have your cake and eat it. But technology thus needs to be actually easily transferable. It is essential that we facilitate the transfer of clean energy solutions to both India and China. They need to be able to use coal. That is the only easily available energy sources in those two growing countries. So they need to have access to clean coal energy-based solutions. It's not a question of fossil fuels versus non-fossil fuels. Any kind of statistics, and I think Professor Chu could speak more elegantly about it, would prove you that so-called renewable energies will only be part of a very, very small part of the issue.
This is really about our sustainability of the world, not any one country in particular, and that the environment that we are providing for our children and our children's children is really what's at stake here.
The world hasn't done a good job on this now. People are more aware that it's a problem. There is a huge possibility of triggering technological solutions, but they're not going to be triggered if there isn't the economic support for them. And I suspect that economic support has to come from the industrialized world, through the capping mechanism, through an incentive mechanism, and maybe some sort of funding mechanism. Some countries may not be able to involve themselves in carbon trading, so you might need to do something different. But all this has to be negotiated.
We can fix the problem. We have to have a cap which generates a system, which generates a set of incentives as well as large technological investment. And the developing countries will be happy to participate as long as we pay them enough. Thank the panel for, I think, a fascinating discussion, and thank the audience.